a blank screen.
Yeah. I like the picture.
Yeah, thank you, I really have it done well. Oh no, now we're, it's okay. It's an article I was asked to write, so we'd want to have that up there. No,
Sorry,
there we
there
go again.
That's all right, there it goes.
Oh, hey, I've seen that.
There we go. Do you know why it's doing that?
I do not.
It doesn't like you.
Remember That's a common word.
Yeah.
And it works when it's not plugged in.
Mind if I close this?
I don't want it closed. Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe it just doesn't work. There we go. So this should be here, right? So it should be able to. So when that plugs in, what happens to it? So
It should just be picking up the source. So there's no reason why it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have those screens in your desk?
Well,
Okay.
there you
There it
go.
is.
Yay, don't touch it. All right, thanks, Shane. It's okay. It's a moment. All right, so anytime I think we contemplate rolling out a new initiative or adjusting our practice, I think the change leadership craft moves are also very important. So in thinking about, as we're moving forward with our highly capable program qualifications for students, the conversation around that has generated a lot of discussion. And I think part of tonight is clarifying where we are and our intent in this program work. So again, just bringing all of us back to the idea that equity and access are key pieces of our strategic plan. And in thinking about equity and access, I also want to just remind us, I shared this with a group of parents last week, one of my favorite quotes from Peter Drucker, which is about the distinction between management and leadership. And I think it's very clearly equity and access and providing all children an opportunity to access the highly capable program is the right thing to do. I think the management piece here, doing it the right way, I think I'm learning as we go in terms of not trying to do everything at once. So we're really needing to pace ourselves, and again, kind of stopping for a minute and pausing and making sure that we're actually hitting the target we want to hit with this. So I took this language out of our strategic plan, which is really around all students having access to rigorous instruction. And I believe in North Shore that's what we want for every child, regardless of the program they're in, whether they're in our general ed program or our AP program or our IB or special education or high cap. Really, we want children to be served where they're best suited, and we want to make sure we can figure that out. So having access to programs such as Highly Capable are really important. That being said, I think that how we go about that and providing all children access, our theory of action was one of the obstacles to children accessing the program was not being able to take the assessment. We had a nomination process and a Saturday testing cycle that really was not accessible for all families and all children. So our theory of action was we want to make sure it is accessible for all children, so we tested or screened 16,000 students, as you know. And really, I think Jen Benson has led some pretty bold work, right? There's been a lot of publicity, and maybe our expectations are really running high that this is going to be, and I think it will be life-changing for some children and some families. That being said, there are children and families who, during the course of these conversations, have not felt as warmly embraced or as celebrated for their achievements. So I think it's going to be really important moving forward that I, in a leadership position, and we in the district are able to communicate about traditionally underrepresented student groups in whatever fashion they are in a way that is not divisive and that doesn't target any particular group in any way in terms of the language we use. And so I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But we really want to be thinking about our program and how it's going to grow and what are the supports necessary. So one of the things that I think is still a little unclear for some families is, and some staff probably too, or community members, is what were the changes specifically that we've made. So what we've done is we've said that we this time had a two-step process, and previously it was a one-step process. So we had a screener, which we moved to a nonverbal, which is the Naglieri screener for all 16,000 students. And I want to remind folks, this is like a one-year catch-up for us, right? We're not going to need to assess all 16,000 again because this was the year we said we want to check in on every child. But in the future, there'll be certain benchmark years where that assessment happens and students new to the district. So that's not like an every year 16,000 student topic. But we went to the Naglieri for grades K through 8 because it didn't have language. And we felt like that was a barrier to have, it was more culturally responsive to use the Naglieri. And we said that if you hit the 85th percentile in however that's calculated for the Naglieri, you'd move forward to the next step. And the next step really is around achievement testing for the ITBS, which has been the previous assessment. And it's in reading or math, depending on the assessment needs. We want to minimize the time kids are in testing. So if they already demonstrate either through their STAR reading, which is a type of in-class assessment many districts use, or their IRR, if that's what they're doing, if they're already well above grade level, or 2 grade levels, I believe, above in reading, then they would only take the math part of the ITBS to save some time. And again, these tests, the ITBS, are scored away from the district. They're by the assessment providers, so there's not any kind of bias here locally. Just everyone that hit the 85th percentile or higher has that opportunity. So here's where, and I met with a group of parents last week and about the Torrance Creative Assessment. And I want to say that I learned new information today and emailed the group of parents I met with last week because I learned a new piece about it. So I put it in italics, the adjustment I made on the slides. I sent a PowerPoint out Sunday, and then I sent one out again this afternoon that I had Jen actually look at to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. But essentially, the Torrance Creative Assessment is not weighted. We had parents ask what's the weighting between that test and the ITBS for placement. We weren't weighting them. And the Torrance will not be used to deny placement to any students. What it's used is it's that second option for, or the intent is to use it if students score a 95 or better, in the 95th percentile or better in the ITBS. The Torrance, if it's higher, if it's in the 95-ish or above, that will help them in case they had gotten only maybe an 87 or 88 on the Naglieri as a screener. So it's a second opportunity for that non-linguistic creative assessment. And Jen is probably able to explain that even better. But the yes, and I've asked to meet with that parent group again too to re-look at that. But it's not something that would take a child out of placement, but it might support kids who did very well on achievement, but maybe not as high on the Naglieri to vault them into placement. We do want to meet with parent groups to further discuss the Torrance results because we really haven't done that assessment in this district. And we also want to talk to districts around the country who are using those results and think about what kind of program design might we look at for students that do well with the Torrance, but not to think that we're going to have that program in place this fall. That's going to take some study before we're ready to really take that on. And also for our teachers to be prepared. We're not, we're talking 5 months. So I think we want to be thoughtful about that. Again, the Torrance is not something that's scored locally. It's something that's scored out of area by folks who've been trained to score that. And there will be program planning done based on how that assessment comes out. And we want to share sort of those assessment results with parents and talk about what does this mean if students do really well on that, how do we support them in their classroom, whether it's the highly capable classroom or their classroom that might be a regular ed classroom. How can we really support and nurture that creative thinking? So again, as I met with parents, one of the things we talked about is that, excuse me, that race is not a criteria for program admission. That in our conversation and our excitement about really encouraging, supporting, and providing access to traditionally underrepresented either racial or economic or second language learners, I think there was a feeling, I know there was a feeling that somehow there was a ceiling on the program, and that if that students perhaps who were higher represented, student groups that were higher represented would have fewer spots or something in the program, and that's not the case, and was never our intent. So we actually are going to talk about during the multidisciplinary team meeting, which is required by law as they review the finalists, that we'll do that similar to how Bellevue does it, which is where the name and race are not included as part of the packet for those conversations. So I'm not a social scientist to know single blind or double blind what the terminology is, but we want those factors taken out of the conversation when we're talking about program admission, and we've committed to that. Also need to really be thoughtful, I think I've talked about this third bullet, that not to get too focused or caught up in this underrepresented conversation, but it's really about all kids. We live in a unique area of the United States, and we have a lot of families within North Shore School District who are here working in the tech industry or medical research and so forth. And we're going to have different dynamics and demographics, for example, in a school district perhaps in Nashville, where Dr. Ford is from. So that being said, we did have a lot of work to do around assessment for all and checking in on all students, and we feel like we're doing that, but I know we need to really stay focused on how do we talk about this. I mean, the conversation's really important. It can be hurtful to some families if we're not thoughtful about it. So then just, again, kind of a reiteration. I think the last bullet talks a little bit, I think there was some feeling that to have more children in the program who perhaps hadn't previously assessed or been screened, that we've lowered the standard or lowered the bar, and that's not the case. What we've done is simply said more kids have an opportunity to be assessed. So just want to make sure that's on the record. We've not lowered the bar. Our plan is to add class sections, and there's been a conversation around budget, and one of the things I've said is, if you have 100 students, you have roughly 4 teachers, we say 25 to 1, and if one of those sections is currently highly capable, then 3 are regular and 1 is high cap, and if we double the number of highly capable, which I'm not sure we will, I don't think it'll be quite that, but it just, the ratio shifts, but it's not a huge more expense. They're all our kids already, so, which takes that issue around, is there a ceiling on the program? There's not. We're going to try to provide those sections or in-class model services wherever we're able to do that to serve all our kids. And it should be noted that not all our kids are in self-contained, highly capable classrooms today. I know that when that came up this morning in Cabinet, I thought Jen said about half our kids are in services in their traditional classroom rather than the self-contained, highly capable classroom. So, I think that this is very doable. We just have to, be patient as we evolve into this equitable access for more children. And of course, we have professional development. As teachers have, as we have more teachers teaching highly capable and or providing services, the professional development I think is going to be critical as well. So the commitments moving forward is to stay transparent with our parent groups and try to meet with folks. I know Jen Benson has a family advisory committee for highly capable. Austina Devante has a parent council, and I feel really positive that we're gonna, even when we've hit misunderstandings, that we're able to come back to the table and work through it so that we really will try to be transparent. And then future work, in meeting with parents, one of the things people have asked for is to continue to look at what are root causes for this underrepresentation, and also how to improve success for children who perhaps haven't previously been in a highly capable program or perhaps haven't had a sibling in a highly capable program and so forth. So just wanted to clarify those points and wonder if there are any questions about that.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Just as a thinking about this. If we do that creativity test, the Torrent test, and somebody qualifies as being a very creative thinker, they would qualify then at some level, at some moment in the future, to take the ITBS. And I guess I'm wondering, does the ITBS really address creativity, or is it more of an academic assessment? And then maybe thinking about opening up highly capable for highly creative kids, maybe that don't perform well in ITBS.
Well, I think when Dr. Ford was here, she talked about, and the state law talks about how are we assessing for creativity, giftedness and creativity, and leadership actually as well. I think right now we have a highly capable program that's essentially structured around highly capable achievement and not so much around creativity, though in general those go hand in hand, right? In general, not always, but often your more divergent thinkers are achieving, not always, but so I think what we don't have is a program design that would be a model that would be focused not on achievement, right? So, and I think that was one of the places where, in meeting with parents and also with staff, we don't want to get too far out ahead of ourselves to say we're going to provide a program that we don't know what that's going to look like yet, right? But I think it is something we could look at down the road, and it kind of goes back to looking at, that's why it's in italics, because I thought I knew where we were headed with that last week, but learned more information today, so I want to make sure I'm transparent too, that it's in italics, because that's a shift in what we discussed last week. But the whole idea about parent focus groups to discuss it and understand it, right? And then talk about what would it be for program planning in the future. Because I think there probably is such a program idea. We just have to kind of research where it's being used for such models around the country. I think it is an important assessment, and it's also important we use it well, so.
This is, thank you, first of all, very much. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know until you take that big first step.
Yes.
Right? And
right.
and it can take courage to take the big
Right.
first step as an organization. And what I think, from what I'm hearing you say, there's actually two parts to this where we're enriching our system. The first is the removal of the fence.
Right.
Where having a nomination process and then testing on Saturdays was inadvertently putting up a barrier for kids. But also what I'm hearing is talking about looking at intelligence in a more rich way, more data-based and research-based way.
Right.
You know, how intelligence, you know, I've read that there's actually 9 different types of intelligence. I think Dr. Ford talked about this. It's more, instead of a bell curve, it's more like a 3D bell. And it's lovely to see the organization starting to look at the richness that's intelligence. And it can, the goal of looking at removing the barriers as well as looking at different types of intelligence
Right.
can get conflated, and I could understand how that could get confusing. But this is the way it's been designed as an organization, is not to create a zero-sum exercise, right? It's to grow the pie, not to slice it up differently.
Right, and I think unfortunately, there was a, I agree. There was I think the choice of words perhaps at different junctures led to the belief that somehow there were gonna be some, like we would have limited spots and a different level of competition, and that's not what we're doing. We're saying it's the same bar, just more people have an opportunity to demonstrate whether or not they're ready.
Which is, yeah, and that clarification is helpful,
Yeah.
so thank you. But it's this nuanced conversation about helping kids, I think, is helpful to all our system. Bless you.
Thank you.
Other comments on this?
I can't wait to be in a classroom where we're encouraging creativity. I mean,
Yeah.
what
Right.
fun that will be.
Well, and I think all our teachers want to be in that creative mode,
Right.
right? And it's ironic, honestly, after the, I don't know, 10 plus years of, right, the standardized, standardized testing, which basically said, you know, there wasn't a lot of room for some of the creativity. And I think we may have completely missed the boat by narrowing our curriculum and I think broadening it to enable more divergent thinking, creativity. We might even have done better on the standardized test. I don't know. It's
And it's goal 4,
right, totally goal 4.
right?
Yeah.
Critical thinkers, and so, and it's, you know, and if the messaging has inadvertently created a different message, I mean, it definitely wasn't the board's intent. So thank you for,
Yeah.
you know, speaking for us and helping to clarify it too.
I'd be really interested to see how that creativity assessment pans out, what it looks like.
I think we
because-
all are.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't think we want to continue to silo kids into boxes. As we talked about, there's different intelligences. I think the goal, and even the altruistic goal would be that, you know, classrooms are just more creative in how we teach
Right.
to reach the most kids rather than siloing kids based on
Right,
standardized tests, you know, and
right.
you know, at the same time we criticize, you know, we're criticizing the SAT and, you know, as not a very good indicator of success.
Right.
Sometimes there's a difference between intelligence and success depending on how you categorize either one. But success in college, you know, but at the same time we're kind of, it's hard for us not to go to data, right? We go, okay,
Right.
we're gonna base intelligence on ITBS or,
Right.
you know, and, you know, parents and students gain that test too, even at young ages. That's not a secret either, so.
Right.
Yeah, so I think this is great work. Now we're just opening it up, opening up the box to different ways of looking at where we're trying to go.
Yeah, I just think for me it is and continues to be a great lesson about how even a really, what I think, good and right shift is, if we don't do it in the right way and talk about it thoughtfully, it can inadvertently harm other families, right? So I just think what we want to do is talk about all families as North Shore families, and how do we provide all North Shore families that level playing field, so that, kind of as Ish said, even at the state of the school, it's not more boxes for the picture, it's just take the fence down and let us compete. And so I think, I think it's good work, and we're continuing to work on how we message and talk about it.
Yeah.
And we'll continue to, my commitment is to continue conversations with all parents on this topic, And I think we still have some conversations around the Torrance, but I think the request to do name and racial category blind multidisciplinary team makes a lot of sense. So, and staff
That's a
is
good
on
idea.
board with that, so.
As you're doing it, you know, the whole, just being transparent and
Right.
having good conversations and good communications is key. It's all
Yeah.
about making sure people know what the intent is, that
Right.
there's no secret, you
Yeah.
know, agenda,
Yeah.
or it can even be like the Project 2020, right?
Right.
I mean, change is tough, and people just wanna understand why we're doing certain things,
Right.
right? It's an altruistic goal,
Right.
and it's not
Right.
this nefarious one, right?
No, we don't wanna be sneaky.
Yeah.
Just wanna provide the best possible, you know, experience for all our kids.
Absolutely.
So, anything else on this? Nope. All right, well, we're almost at 6:30, which is kind of where I had hoped to end, about 90 minutes. So, as we contemplate just strategic planning metrics, just wanted to, I guess, restate, we've got the plan, the 5 goals that happen honestly in classrooms and in schools, the 4 building blocks that we've now divided around among district and support staff. And then Project 2020 sits underneath it to make sure that we're as efficient as humanly possible in conducting that business. So just so you begin to get that, I like to think of it as kind of a 3-tier support structure, pyramiding. Our instructional council, the base is broad in terms of supports and processes to support the building blocks, so the buildings can just do the work we, you know, expect, so pretty excited.
If I could make an observation, I think this is something that the broader community would love to hear about. We hear a lot of curiosity about implementation of the plan, so if you're ever
Right.
looking for a blog topic.
A blog topic, right, there you go, I certainly could. I think it's, honestly, it's like building a model, right? And we've created the model, the design in general, and now it's those pieces to make sure that it's gonna stand if the wind blows,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
When the wind blows.
When the wind
When
blows,
the
that's
wind
right.
blows,
Well, and
yeah.
remember what we've been told, right? If the strategic plan's in the right alignment, when the wind blows or external forces come, it tightens, right?
Right.
It becomes stronger. If it's not in alignment and there are external forces, it shatters, it breaks apart. And what we want is that tight alignment, support, champions work so that it drives us closer if there are external forces, not, you know, creates chaos or whatever. Any questions about those 3 pieces, since we've got just a few minutes? Anything you're not seeing that you think, good if we saw that, or I wonder about this, or?
Just back to what kind of, Amy and I were talking about as far as that second stage, I don't know how you call it, because you have the internal business review,
Mhm.
then you have the customers, right?
Right.
Customer's perspective isn't always the same as what the people running the company are really thinking.
That is true.
I think we're doing great. Well, the customer's like, well, I'm not really liking the product, so.
Yeah.
Or the customers might not be, they might have bad expectations, you know, faulty expectations, or not realistic expectations, so it'll be interesting, I don't know how, that seems like a next step, or is that something that you and the staff do?
Well, I think what,
Interviewing the buildings,
Yeah.
I'm thinking teachers and administrators.
I
but-
think one of the things we've talked about in our meetings with the association too is surveying just staff, parents, and students. And we've got some work to do in identifying what we would do with that data. What data do we want to collect? How would we want to use that data? What are the touch points? I think to use David's and Miriam's terms. But I think we're looking forward to doing something like that next fall. We had thought maybe this spring, but as testing looms, and this has been, honestly, while we're talking about these forward topics, just pausing for a moment, realizing all of the change this year, which in a sense, for me, I didn't explicitly say that this morning in cabinet with Miriam and David, but we're sort of doing a reset, right? We've grade reconfiguration, opened a new school, block scheduling for many of the schools. I mean, there are a lot of changes just this year for us to kind of make sure that we're there. And I think that next year, this work, it sets the stage for next year. In our discussion that we don't need to add more committees this year. And, you know, getting really clear about work we're gonna start and what its bounds are this summer, I think is gonna be really important, as well as the new reboundary. Just when you think you're kinda pausing for a moment. I know, it's like the tortoise and the hare, and we wanna be really, really fit tortoises.
Perfect goal.
Right? Well, because if we're hares, then I think we miss things sometimes, so if we're a really fit tortoise, kind of a lean tortoise.
I think it's good too, your comment before about dovetailing the onboarding of the new staff
Right.
coming in with this,
Right.
the start of this process so that they
Yeah.
kind of mesh together as it moves
Well, I think
along.
it's gonna be critical, because it's a changing of the guard in some ways, particularly in the key sort of support areas, with a larger than ever bond and tech levy, so it's really a time where efficient processes, if now isn't the time, I don't know when it will be, right? So how do we support that work? Yeah. Well, President Hayes,
All right.
it's 6:30, it gives us a few minutes to catch our breath before 7. For some of us who've been up since 4:20, looking at snow, I'll try to stay awake. 2 hour late.
Yes.
It was hard though, where I live in Woodinville and downtown, there wasn't much on the ground, so I was kinda,
Woodinville on the hill
Yes.
didn't
Yeah.
melt till the afternoon.
that's what we
Yeah,
heard.
I've still got stuff at my house.
Well, you're on the hill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. Just a little Charlie Brown theme.